to Government 101 Part 2, or Government 102, however you'd like to look at it. Raise your hand if this is your first time coming to this event. Okay, and raise your hand if this is your second time coming. Oh, great. So we've had people that have been here before and seen what we have to offer. Well, first of all, I would just like to say welcome to our office, the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. I'm Pete Vanderpool, and I'm glad to see everyone here. I'm very excited that we've been able to start this program and been able to fund and pay for the dinners that you're all going to enjoy this evening. So thank you to Marie Calendars, and thank you to the other Board of Supervisors who are not here tonight for putting forward that funding, because they realize this is a very important function to provide education to special district board members who are elected officials representing the same constituents that we all represent. So it's very important that you all are equipped with the tools necessary to do an effective job for the constituents you serve in your capacity. So Community Services District representatives, raise your hand. Okay, we've got a few of those here. And Memorial Districts, anyone here from Memorial District? Okay, and just another show of hands just to give the attorneys up here, who, by the way, have volunteered their time. So let's give them a round of applause because they're all here voluntarily. I just want to give everyone an idea of who exactly they're dealing with. How many of you have received any kind of training regarding the Public Records Act, the Brown Act, filling vacancies, how to appoint, that is filling a vacancy, and other boardsmanship type issues? Raise your hand if you've received any training, okay? And raise your hand if this is your first time getting any sort of training. And how many of you have been board members that have been sitting on a board for many years, or served on a board for many years and have not received any training? So you've been basically doing your job, but really doing the best you can based on the books and manuals you've read. Okay. So this is, again, this is really just showing that the need is there. We're glad you're here, and we're sure glad that these attorneys have all volunteered their time to be here to help educate you so that we can all serve the constituents of Tulare County very well. So on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, welcome, and thank you for coming, and we look forward to helping you in any way we can to better serve your constituents. So please enjoy the evening, and Barbara, it's all yours.
I'm Barbara Grunwald. I'm a deputy with the Tulare County Council's office. As you can see from the list of speakers in your materials and the two people sitting up here, our speakers are going to be coming in and out tonight. Just like you, they're all very busy people. And so our early speakers are here, and the later ones are coming later, except for me. I'm last, so you get me the whole evening. Just a couple of housekeeping things. One of the things that we figured out last year is that it slows things down too much to do a lot of questions and answers during the presentations. And so I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but in order to get you in and out of here in a good amount of time, it's a long evening already. We've got you scheduled to be here till 9 o'clock. That's a lot of information to try and get through. And so that's why we're feeding you dinner. And so what we've decided to try this year is your materials came with a couple of 3x5 cards, and we have extras. So you find those 3x5 cards. When you think of a question during a presentation, write it down, and we'll have people collecting them. And then at the end of each presentation, we'll take about 5 minutes and try and answer as many of those questions as we can from up here. And unfortunately, to try and keep the evening moving, we're just not going to be able to do that kind of lengthy interaction that we tried to do last year. So you can come up, and for the speakers who are still here we will take a break in the middle. For the speakers who are still here, you can try and catch them during the break, or those of us who are here at the end, you can talk to us afterward. Or we are private practice attorneys and are here for business purposes, so hire them as your attorney and ask them the question and pay them for their advice. But so we'll do the best we can to keep the evening moving and to deal with as many of your questions as we can in that amount of time. The dinners are in the back of the room. I'm sure all of you picked those up as you came in. We're not taking a formal lunch break, so feel free to get that out at any point and eat it whenever it's convenient for you. And the trash cans are in the back of the room, so of course we would appreciate it if you dump it whenever that's appropriate. We do have restrooms, so when you want those, they're out here in this hallway area right next to the building. You can go through one door if you go through over here. You can go through two double doors if you come out, go through this set over here. So it's probably going to be easier to go through one of the doors in the back there. And then very important, our official legal disclaimer. Right after the agenda section, we've got the agenda page with the list of the speakers. The page after that is our official disclaimer that says, nothing we say tonight should be considered official legal advice from your attorney. When you talk to your lawyer, they always say things like, well, tell me all the facts. So what we're going to be doing tonight is telling you sort of generic kinds of things that where the advice might change in a particular fact situation if there is something a little different about it. So that's why when we do these kinds of presentations, we always have to put in this sort of disclaimer, because real legal advice in a specific situation requires you to tell us all of the facts that are relevant to that situation. And of course, in this kind of general presentation, we're not doing that. So this can't be considered legal advice. And as I said, we will be taking a break roughly halfway through the evening. So with that, I'll introduce our first speaker. As you can see from your agenda, our first section of the meeting tonight is on a couple of pieces of the Brown Act. For those of you who have been here before, we didn't want to just repeat what we did last year, so we're taking probably the two most confusing and important sections of the chunks of the Brown Act, the agenda and minutes, and then the closed session piece, and sort of drilling down a little bit and doing those in a little more detail, so that those of you who've been here before won't feel like you're wasting your time repeating it. By the way, I'd like to say I'm thrilled that those of you who did come before came back. So that makes us feel good that we did something worthwhile enough for you to feel like it was worth coming back to. And I'm thrilled that those of you who are new are here. Obviously, you heard good things about the 101 last year. We are videotaping it as well as audio taping it this year, so you can go back to your districts and tell them that those who weren't able to come to this training can get it over the internet through audio, or this year through video. I'm not quite sure how that's going to be posted, but we're working on that. We may, I don't know if we'll end up sending you a DVD or what, but those opportunities may, I don't know how we're going to make that available. I don't know. They're shaking their head at the back of the room. They don't want to do DVDs. So we'll figure that out. But with that, we'll jump right into our first presentation. I won't do the full bio. It's there in the materials for you. Mike Farley of the Farley Law Firm is going to give you about half an hour, 40 minutes on agendas and minutes under the Brown Act. And again, if you've got questions, write them down and we'll be collecting them and he'll answer those afterward.
How many people were here last year again? So I was last year, and you notice I'm first this year. I had to wait till about 10 o'clock. Can you imagine anything more exciting on a Wednesday night than talking about an agenda and minutes? I mean, come on, this is really boring stuff, but it's really important, and let me tell you why. What is an agenda? An agenda is, if you will, in a public setting, in a public meeting, the agenda is really for that night's proceeding. It's the Constitution, if you will. It will tell the public exactly what we're going to talk about, exactly what we're going to do. And I'm going to go through all the specifics that have to be on an agenda. But first I want to tell you quickly why the agenda is important. And it's because I'm certain none of the elected officials in this county, but many times elected officials like to, just like lawyers, they like sometimes to say things and hear themselves talk. And again, I'm sure it doesn't apply to any elected official in Tulare County, nor to any of the lawyers appearing tonight. So sometimes when they go beyond the agenda, it creates a problem. In the Brown Act, we have all kinds of sanctions, civil and criminal, if we violate the Brown Act. So my goal when I help prepare an agenda is to keep it tight. This is what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about anything else. when I was in law school a long, long time ago, there was a story that was told that I think always applies even to public agencies. And it was something like this. It's not that funny, but it's applicable, I think. What they teach us in law school, believe it or not, is to only ask a certain amount of questions, only say a certain amount of things to get your point across. Don't say too much, because if you say too much, you get yourself in trouble. And there was an actual case tried one time in the early 1900s. A fellow was sued criminally and then civilly for biting somebody's ear off. It's a true case. And so so this guy got sued for biting his ear off, and his lawyer had made an agenda, had made a description of how he was going to defend him that evening in that trial. So when the victim's lawyer put on the case, he asked the victim all the questions. Oh, can you hear? And I can't hear. My ear's gone on. It goes on and on. Poor guy. Well, he never asked him, did the defendant bite your ear off? He never asked him that. So the defendant's lawyer, the guy that's defending this guy, stands up and he looks at his agenda. And what on there is, did he ask him? He didn't. He didn't ask him if he bit his ear off. So he should have sat down, but not having gone to this class, he decided he was going to speak some more. So he said, let me ask you a question, Mr. Witness. Did you, in fact, see my client bite his ear off? And he said, no. But once again, if he had followed the agenda, not said too much, he's won the case. Sit down. But being a lawyer that didn't come to this meeting, he said, then how do you know he bit his ear off? And the guy said, because I saw him spit it out. So my point is, if you say too much, you get into trouble. So in that case, the guy ended up losing the case. He went too far. He said too much. So when we have our agenda, what we want to do is keep the agenda tight. We want to keep it very precise what we're to say. So let's talk generally about an agenda. Once an agenda is prepared, and we'll go through what can be on the agenda, you have to post the agenda for your regular meeting 72 hours in advance. This is required under the Brown Act. You should have rules and bylaws that tell you where to post it. 3 places usually. It's like at a post office, at the district office, or wherever. 3 separate places. So you should always want to post the agenda 72 hours in advance. Well, what happens if you have a situation where you have something that you have to speak to the board about, but you don't have 72 hours to post your agenda? What do we do under that circumstance? Can we do something? Does the Brown Act allow for anything there? So we've got to meet, we've got to have this meeting, but I don't have 72 hours. You can do what's called a special meeting, and you have to post within 24 hours. There is a provision in the Brown Act for an emergency meeting, but it has to be a real bona fide emergency. If you're a water district, your pumps have gone out, or your main ditch is flooding, everybody around you, and you have an hour requirement. Even under circumstances, if you can't give an hour, you can do an emergency meeting. And the only criteria for an emergency meeting is that you notify the media. If there's a media request, you notify them. So, regular meetings, 72 hours, special meetings, 24 hours, emergency meetings, 1 hour or less. An emergency meeting, we're generally not allowed to go into closed session, which we're going to get to in a moment. One thing we've noticed over the years, especially in light of this City of Bell thing, I don't know if you guys have been following that, but the city manager made like $5 million. Have you been following that case in the City of Bell? Where they were making all this money in a little tiny city? So one thing what we have found now with all our districts and our cities is that we have John Q. Citizen who never cared much about the city in the past is now coming to the district offices asking all these questions. So I want to walk you through a hypothetical situation. And I think each thing I say here will be brought out in tonight's presentation about the agenda. So Bob Citizen comes into the district office, and Bob wants to know how much you make. And Bob wants to see the cell phone records of all your district members, district board elected members. And he wants to know how the money is being spent. And he wants to know about all these projects. He makes all these requests. Somebody else tonight will speak to you about public records, so I'm not going to go into that. So this guy comes in every single day. And so finally you've had enough and you say, you know what, Bob? By the way, Bob, what's your last name and where do you live? Well, I'm not going to tell you my last name and I'm not going to tell you where I live. But I want to know all these things. So you've had enough with Bob and you say, Bob, the district meets next Wednesday, you come next Wednesday. And you can tell the district everything we want. He says, okay. So he comes and you're thinking, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a sign-up sheet. And on the sign-up sheet, I'm going to put, if you want to attend this meeting, you got to tell me your full name and your address. So far, so good. So we're going to find out who Bob is, and we're going to find out where Bob lives. Because at this meeting, he can ask all the questions he wants, and we're going to find out everything. So Bob shows up, and you hand him the sign-up sheet, and he goes, I'm not signing that. Well, Bob, if you don't sign it, you can't attend the meeting. Okay. So Bob doesn't leave, and we don't have any police to escort him. So Bob stands up in the middle of the meeting and goes on, and he starts asking you questions, the same questions. How much did you make? And what about this? And so your chairman of the board, your board says, go ahead and answer all those questions. Let's talk about this. Let's tell them how much you make, and what do we get for cell phones, and what do we do this? So you have this 1 hour discussion with Bob, where you're answering his questions and giving him all this information. And then Bob says, you know what, I don't trust you guys. I'm going to record everything you tell me. So he turns on a recorder. Okay? So you got the facts in your head? We got Bob shows up at a meeting. You want Bob to give you his last name? You're going to talk to him for an hour, and he's going to record everything you say. Okay? So now let's go through the agenda. What do we say the agenda is? The agenda is everything we can talk about. If it isn't on the agenda, we cannot talk about it. So there are certain exceptions, very limited. If a member of the public makes a general inquiry, like what are the district's hours, you can say it's from 8 to 5. You can say those things. Or if they don't understand an agenda item, you can clarify it. The board can refer matters to the staff, take care of that. But generally, if it's not on the agenda, you can't talk about it. And why is that? Because we don't want to say things that aren't on the agenda that might get us in trouble down the road. So we keep the agenda tight, so we go through it. So going back to Bob's situation, the agenda must have on it an item that must describe exactly what we're going to talk about. Is Bob on our agenda? Bob's on our agenda. Bob can't speak to us, right? Except, on our agenda, we must always put on there the public's right to talk. So we have to always have, the public has the right to address the board on matters of interest to the board or within the jurisdictional limits of the board. So Bob has the right, even though he's on the agenda, Bob has the right to get up and complain. Does Bob have a right to complain for an hour? How much time, does anybody have this problem? How much time can you limit? 2 minutes? 5 minutes? 3 minutes?
3 to 5.
Yeah, 3 minutes. There's an Attorney General thing that says 3. I kind of like 5, but I have done 2. I've done 2, just to hurry things along. If we had 100 people tonight and they all wanted to address the same thing, we limited it to 2. So now we know Bob has shown up. He's not on the agenda, but we're going to give Bob an opportunity to discuss his complaint for 3 to 5 minutes, right? Are we going to be able to take care of his problem tonight if he says, I want to know certain facts and I want to discuss the pros and cons of putting a new ditch over here or buying land over here? Are we going to be able to discuss those during his, if he asks the board questions, you know, I understand you guys are going to try and buy a piece of land south of town here, south of the district. Do we have an opportunity? Are we supposed to talk to him about it? Can we talk to him about it? No, it's not on the agenda. The agenda, remember the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, we can't talk about it. You can acknowledge it, and they can give direction to staff to answer these questions at the next meeting. So Bob's been there now. We got one problem now. That's right, Bob didn't sign up. So Bob didn't give us his name and his address before he attended our meeting. What do we do about that? I mean, can't we make everybody sign up and tell us their name and their address before they can attend the meeting? Who says we can do that? Who says we can make them give us their name and address before they attend the meeting? Nobody. So you can't. Your name and address is not a requirement to attend the meeting. What about, though, if he wants to complain about things going on in the district? Can we require his name in? If he wants to speak, can we do that then? That's kind of an up in the air issue, but my answer is yes. I always tell my districts, yeah, give us your name. And because of privacy concerns, we don't require your street address, but are you a member of the district? Do you reside within the district? Because we have a right to know if this is a complaint coming from one of our constituents within the district, or is it coming from outside? Because if it's coming from outside, we'll address it, but there's not a whole lot we can do for you because you're not within our jurisdiction. Remember, the public's time to address is to address the council or address the district on issues of importance or within its jurisdictional limits. Okay? Now, so we've got Bob in there. He didn't sign up. We haven't got his name yet. We're only going to talk for 3 to 5 minutes. What if he brings something up that he actually has a point? It's a real important point, and it's something we weren't aware of. There's going to be a new law or something go into effect before we meet again, and we have to do something, pass something, have a resolution before the next meeting. It's not on our agenda. We're not going to have a chance to do it. It has to be done within the next day, and Bob brings it to our attention. What do we do? What do we do? Can we amend the agenda at the meeting? Can we amend the agenda? What's the purpose of the agenda? The agenda is to give the world notice. This is what we're going to talk about. This is the topics. This is what we're going to do. So can you amend the agenda at the meeting? You can if 2 elements are met. It has to be something that requires immediate action, and it requires your attention. It came to your attention after the posting of the agenda. And the way it usually works is this. I posted the agenda, something came to our attention, we have to act on it before we can meet again, and it can't be acted upon later. So in other words, you can amend the agenda under that limited circumstance. So I'm going to kind of come back to Bob, and since you're in districts, I don't know if you get people that come up with let's say someone is addressing the district on an issue, and they have a complaint. Let's say you're in an irrigation district, for example, and one of your ditches broke, and you flooded Bob's land. And so he's addressing you during this. Why is it we don't want the board to respond to that? It's not on the agenda once, but let's say the chairman says, God, that ditch broke, man, that's our fault. We're sorry. We're going to, send us an itemization of your damages and we'll pay for it. Well, we have a claims process that you go through. You're all familiar with that. If somebody has a claim, they have to file a governmental claim with you because you're a public entity. You don't want to discuss that in open session. You want it to be agendized, and you want it to be under closed session for potential litigation. You may or may not be at fault. Maybe somebody else, broke the ditch or something. So those are the reasons why when the public addresses the district, it's really important. I always like to have the person running our meetings tell the public, you're welcome to speak, and we'll respond as best we can, but we really can't address your concerns unless you're on the agenda. Because otherwise they think you're just not paying attention to them. But you don't want them to say too much, because if they have a claim and you have a board member admits the district at fault, then we're going to have a hard time defending that down the road. So from the lawyer's perspective, we try to keep the comments more concise. The agenda must also state the location. So whatever your address is, where your meeting is going to be, the time. If there's a public hearing, you have to post the public hearing within the agenda. There is a procedure for teleconferencing, but I'm not going to get into that unless somebody really wants me to. It's kind of complicated. You have to have a quorum. If you have one member that's out of the area, you can do a teleconferencing with them. But most of the districts I represent don't have the equipment to do that, so I'm going to avoid that if that's all right. So the public has the right, all members of the public have the right to come to your meeting. Whether they're a member of the district or not, they have the right to attend and make comments. So, coming back to Bob, if Bob is really disruptive, He won't sit down, he's throwing stuff up in the air. What do we do about Bob? Do we get rid of him? How do we get rid of Bob?
911.
So if he's really disruptive, what can you do what can the board do if you have a disruptive member of the public? What can we do? You don't have any police there probably, so there is a penal code section. If you disrupt a public meeting, you can be arrested, but let's don't go there. What do we do? So we got a disruptive member in the public. We want to conclude our meeting. It's one of the few times we can exclude the entire public and continue our meeting with no one present except the media, unless the media is the person causing the disruption. So you can do that. So you can, but you get to stay exactly on the agenda. Of course, you can't go from the agenda. So, in other words, if someone's disruptive, you can do that, and we've had to do that in the past. I hate doing it because it just all kinds of red flags go up. So, the last thing Bob did at this meeting, after he didn't sign in, we talked to him for an hour, he recorded our meeting. He has a tape recorder, and everything we're saying he's recording. Can he do that? Can he record the meeting? Well, what if he pulls out a video camera? Can he video camera? Can he take a picture of us? What if he decides he wants to take a picture and he pulls out this big camera and it's got a flash bulb this big and it lights up the room when he pulls the trigger? Can he do that? Can he? No. He can record and he can use a camera, but he can't be disruptive with the lighting or the noise. If he's got an old camera with big bulbs, he can't do that. So as long as it's not disruptive, he has the absolute right to record and or take photographs, as long as it's not disruptive. It cannot be disruptive. So we've come through, we've made it through the meeting. On your agenda, you're going to post everything that's going to be on the agenda. I should have perhaps given you a sample agenda, but you can go online with any city or the county. They post their agendas, and they're all really good. I did give you as an attachment, someone's going to speak to you later tonight about closed session, but attachment A is a template for closed session items, and we call these safe harbor. These are pretty much prescribed by the Brown Act. If you follow these verbatim, you're going to do okay. But someone else will speak to you about closed session. So we have on our agenda, we're going to have, you usually have welcoming, then you have, some people say the Pledge of Allegiance, and tonight, let's have an invocation. And we stand up and say a prayer and give thanks to God and all those things. Can we do that at a public meeting? Can we say a prayer? Can we do an invocation? Let's have a local minister from the Methodist Church come in and lead us in prayer. And you may have, Helen Horowitz, who's Jewish, up here. And you may have someone that's a Muslim faith, Islam. Is it okay to have someone from a Christian church come up and give an invocation at the public meeting? What say all of you? Who says we can? Who says we can't? Well, it's interesting. Probably get a debate here. A lot of my cities, they do invocations. And the Supreme Court, the last time they ruled, all the court said was you could have a moment of silence, you could have an invocation, but you really should be free from any preference. So if you say in the name of Jesus Christ, that might be too much because most Jewish folks don't believe in Jesus Christ. So on our agendas, I have some cities that want the invocation, but it's got to be kind of neutral. But most cities today, and most Republican entities and districts don't do it. Does anybody do invocations in the districts out there? So we won't worry too much about that. So during the meeting, you've asked your manager or your person taking the minutes to take minutes, and to help her with the minutes, he or she is using a tape recorder. So she's recording the entire process on a tape. And then from the tape, she's going to transcribe her minutes. And we're going to get to the minutes, and I'll take just a second. So she has a tape recorder, and she tapes the meeting. How long? So after the next day, he or she goes in, they do the minutes, and they throw the tape away. Because they don't need it anymore. They took the minutes. Can you do that? Can you throw the tape away after it's done? You got to keep the tape for 30 days. But let's say I'm a member of the public and I want to listen to that tape. So I come to the district and I want to listen to the tape, but I don't have a tape recording machine. You have to provide me with one. You generally have to provide at no cost a device that they can listen to it for those 30 days. So, we took care of Bob. Now we're going to do it. So, any questions real quickly on the agenda? The agenda is really, you can go online, any city, good cities, like Saudi, this county, any city I represent, they have good agendas. Take a look at them. Okay? So, do you have any questions real quickly on the agenda? So, minutes. The Brown Act is silent on minutes. I don't know if we have to keep minutes or not. They doesn't tell me we have to. So what I use is this book. It's the Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules of Order, and it's a really good book. I use it all the time, believe it or not. You're not required to follow Robert's rules. The purpose of the minutes is to describe what was done. I call them action minutes, not verbatim. So let's go back to Bob. And so we're recording it, and so whoever the secretary is, man, Bob was really hot, he was mad, it was a heated debate, they really got into this yelling match. Should that all be in the minutes? No. The minutes should just say, Bob stood up, said a few words. That's it. You don't want to editorialize your minutes. Those will buy you litigation, which is good for lawyers, bad for the district. So you don't editorialize. Like, he was an idiot, this guy was an idiot. So your minutes are really, really, I think, pretty simple. I did give you a template of minutes on the back of Exhibit B, Attachment B. Now you can go to access the county here, their agenda. They'll have minutes from the previous session. City of Visalia, all your cities do. So you can look at it, but basically, the minutes should show who's in attendance, what staff members were in attendance, the time the meeting was called, the time the meeting was adjourned, those sort of things. If a motion is made, you should always say a motion is made by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mrs. Smith, voted on 4-3, 4-2, 4-1, whatever the vote was. I personally don't require that if a motion is made and then withdrawn, that it be in the minutes. Some lawyers would tell you should, I don't. I just only like the minutes to reflect the motions made and passed, and the motions made and not passed. So if a motion is made and it's withdrawn, we don't put it in the minutes. Now, parliamentary procedure is really not that important. The courts have all held that it's the substance, not the procedure. So if substantively we got it right, our agenda is posted right, we have a motion, we have discussion, the public could address us, we got it right, we got a good vote, we're probably okay. So don't worry too much about, I'm going to table this, I want to make a motion, second it, discuss it, and vote. Coming back to the public's time to address. So, item 1, we had pledge allegiance, we had an invocation maybe, we had public's time to address, now we're into the agenda. And Bob says, I want to talk to you about agenda item number 7 when it comes up, and he comes up on agenda item number 7, and he wants to talk to you about it now. Even though he's already addressed you, he wants to talk about that specific agenda item when it comes up. Bob, sit down. Can he do that? Can the public come up and address the board on each agenda item when it comes up? So the Brown Act provides for 2 provisions. You can say, during the public's time to address, we want you to also comment on everything that's on the agenda that you want to talk about. That's a bad rule. The public's time to address, I limit only to non-agendized items. So they technically have the right to do it. We try to do it in an orderly fashion. If you have it, before council or your board takes it under advisement, if somebody wants to address item number 6, I let them address item number 6. But once it comes to the board and they start their discussion, I cut off all the public comment. The Brown Act says they have to have a right to address on items not on the agenda and on items agenda at the time it's being considered or before it's considered. So you do it either way. I like to let them come up, because otherwise they think you're trying to hide something. So we have templates of meetings. One of the things, we'll be done here in 1 second, one of the things I noticed sitting through districts and other public entities, it's kind of awkward how they do things. Sometimes they don't, do I make this a motion? What do I say? So I just give you a little template in the back, welcome the crowd. Then when you make a motion, I'd like to make a motion to approve, second it, discussion, vote. So it might help your board along a little bit and have a guy, someone stumble around, so just kind of help them with the wording on it. One last point, and then I'll sit down or answer any questions you have any. If you describe an item on your agenda, generally speaking, if you can describe it in 20 words or less, you'll be all right. You don't have to give on the agenda. It's just got to be enough to let the public know. If you go into closed session, someone talked to you about that, you have to announce any action taken out of closed session, and your minutes have to reflect that. If they came out of closed session, no action is taken. If you're in a closed session and it's discussed, we'll talk to you about that, how you keep minutes, you can keep minutes. Any questions?
As I said, if you have questions, we'd like to collect them on 3x5, so if you pass them to the end of the row, we can pick those up. If there aren't any, just let us know that. And do I see anybody? Okay, we do have some people with questions, so if you can pass them to the end of the row here, we'll collect them. And we'll go ahead and start with this one while we're collecting the others.
Okay, so the question is a good question. When a motion is made and passed but not unanimously, should the vote record how each member of the board voted? I'd say yes. So in other words, if you have 5 members, I, Smith, Jones, Brown, no, Wilson, and George, or whatever. yes. If someone abstains, put that on there, they abstain. And your minutes will reflect who attended and who's not there, so that should be on there. I didn't say that. Any more questions? It's a burning issue, the agenda. Oh, yeah.
Got another one close to the front here, so we'll do that one while we're waiting for the others to come.
When can a member ask for a vote? Well, if you follow the strict rules of Robert's Rules of Order, there's a procedure, so you could call the question. You want to call the question. Really, though, we don't follow strict parliamentary procedure. So a member at any time can say, oh, I'm going to make a motion. I move that. And then if there's a second, and you get a second, then you go into discussion. So you can call the question. I want to call the question, put an end to this. So, I mean, frankly, sometimes because everyone in the meetings, they let these things drag on too much, and we start talking about tennis shoes, and we shouldn't talk about tennis shoes. So I sometimes intervene and say, we really need a motion. If there's a motion, please state it, and let's move forward. So a board member can call it just about any time they want to. Can a board member vote by telephone? I knew someone was going to ask me. No? There's a procedure in the Brown Act for teleconferencing, and it's a little complicated. I can give you the pinpoints. But generally, if a member wants to attend by teleconference, you have to have conferencing devices at both ends. On the agenda, you must post where that member is going to be, because theoretically the public would have a right to go where he or she is standing, and it has to be brought in. It's a complicated procedure, so if you don't have the equipment for teleconferencing, no. So no. They have to be there present. Well, here's a question. What if a member shows up at 6 o'clock and leaves at 6:01? Do we show them being present or not? They showed up at 6, so they showed up, but obviously you show them leaving at 6:01 in your minutes. But they did attend. When in public comment, someone wants a letter submitted in the record, what happens? Well, yes, if someone has something that they want to put into the minutes, written comments on our agendas, we always have oral comments, written comments, and then the clerk notes those and puts them in the record. So it gets attached to your next, it's noted. You don't read it, and you can, can read it in the record, but we do. Can a board member vote by proxy? No. Can board members give invocation? Sure. Yes, but you gotta be careful, make it neutral. I represent a city where the mayor is a pastor, so he always likes to give an invocation. What is allowed to be on special meeting? Just about anything. You can have a special meeting as long as your agenda specifies you're allowed to go into closed session. Remember, in an emergency meeting, you're not allowed to go into closed session. You have your agenda. You have to. It's just like a regular meeting. You have to have the public time to address. Can you have an item on the agenda to add additional items? You mean, can you add something to the agenda? Is that the question? Can you add something to the agenda?
They didn't have a spot for where you could, that would be the spot on the agenda where you add.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to add it. If I'm understanding the question, if we're going to add something to the agenda, and you have 7 items, you might add as item 8. That's what you mean, but you have to meet the 2 criteria I said earlier. It has to be something that came up after the posting, it has to be acted on immediately. Because the public wouldn't, it may be a topic the public wanted to talk about, but they didn't know it was on the agenda. So it has to be a very limited time. Okay, that's it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. I'm sure all of you appreciated that. I think maybe the most confusing part of the Brown Act is you can kind of work your way through the agendas and minutes eventually, and with a little help from your council. But I think the closed session is probably one of the toughest areas under the Brown Act to deal with. It has lots of tricky rules and lots of restrictions, and so we wanted to drill down a little bit in this session and deal with that a little more in depth. And so this year we have Jim Kuntz, Jeremy Peltzer, and Richardson to talk to you about that. And again, we'll follow the same format where we'll have you write your questions on 3x5s as we go through, and then we'll take a few minutes at the end. If we run out of 3x5s, we've got more, so just raise your hand. Thanks so much.
Hello. I'm here to talk about closed session and